So thank you so much for the invitation to share with you today. It's lovely, although I must admit, when I was invited about 18 months ago, whatever it was, I had visions of being in a nice hotel with you, getting cooked for, having a nice walk, and and here we all are. But nonetheless, it's just great to be with you, and thank you so much for inviting me. As you know very well, building is a metaphor which Paul uses extensively for the work of ministry. He speaks repeatedly about building up the church. In 1 Corinthians, he says, "You are God's building. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as an expert builder, and someone else is building upon it." Of course, Jesus uses the metaphor too. "I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." This is the image that I'd like to invite us to hold in our minds today and tomorrow: ministry as the work of church building. We're going to come back to Paul's words tomorrow, but for today, I'd like to lead us in what I hope will be quite a gentle reflection from the Old Testament, and then send you out to enjoy the sunshine perhaps, and just to spend some time quietly with God. So I'm reading from Exodus 1, beginning at verse 8. "Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, 'Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land.' Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramesses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them." Well, mud bricks have been used in building for at least the last 6,000 years. They've been used in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. The soil and climate of Egypt is particularly suitable for the making of mud bricks. How do you make a mud brick, you ask? Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I shall tell you. These are the ingredients that you need. First, of course, mud. In Egypt, the topsoil is made of clay, silt, and sand, and the annual flooding of the Nile Delta enriches the soil with organic material like dung and chaff, and so bring it to just the right composition. So first of all, you gather your mud. Now you need to add straw temper, and the temper absorbs the stresses experienced during drying and makes it much less likely that the bricks will crack. Experience will tell you the right proportions of straw and mud. Generally, about ½ pound of straw is needed for a cubic foot of mud mixture. But the straw first needs to be chopped into very small pieces. It might be gathered from the fields following harvesting. But you're hearing me all right, aren't you? I'll take silence as you
have their microphone turned off. I've turned it off.
Okay, thank you. So experience will tell you the right proportions of straw and mud to mix, generally about ½ pound of straw for a cubic foot of mud mixture. But first of all, you need to chop the straw into very small pieces. Now, where are you going to get the straw from? You might gather it from the fields following harvesting, but at other times of the year, you have to use chaff instead. As you know, chaff is the byproduct of threshing grain, and it's very hard to gather as the nature of threshing causes the chaff to fly away. So you've got your straw and you've got your mud. Now what? Now you need to mix them together in large troughs and knead the mixture with your feet. This process will take 4 days. Yes, for 4 days you have to knead the mixture with your feet to help with fermentation. Once the mud is sufficiently fermented, you rest it for a day or two, and then you knead it again on the day you're going to make the bricks. To form the bricks, you pour the thick mud mixture into wooden moulds and pack them tight. Then you carry the moulds to the drying floor, which is first layered with straw or sand to prevent the bricks from sticking. And then you empty the moulds out onto the floor and you leave the bricks there for a week to bake in the sun. Now they're ready to be used or stacked for storage. So brick making is back-breaking, foot-chafing, sun-burning, mind-numbing labour. Hold that in your mind and we will read on. I'm now picking up at Exodus 5. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should heed him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has revealed himself to us. Let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God, or he will fall upon us with pestilence or sword." But the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their work? Get to your labors." Pharaoh continued, "Now they are more numerous than the people of the land, and yet you want them to stop working?" That same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, as well as their supervisors, "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. Do not diminish it, for they are lazy. That is why they cry, 'Let us go and offer sacrifice to our God.' Let heavier work be laid on them. Then they will labor at it and pay no attention to deceptive words." So the taskmasters and the supervisors of the people went out and said to the people, "Thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go and get straw yourselves, wherever you can find it, but your work will not be lessened in the least." So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The taskmasters were urgent, saying, "Complete your work, the same daily assignment as when you were given straw." And the supervisors of the Israelites, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, "Why did you not finish the required quantity of bricks yesterday and today, as you did before?" Well, I don't know what your thoughts are as you hear that passage. Personally, I've long thought that the bricks without straw motif has a particularly contemporary feel. I've thought about it when I've heard about companies laying off half their workforce and expecting the remainder to pick up the slack. I've thought about it when I've heard about financial cuts to vital services or funding increases that don't match inflation. I've thought about it when I've sat in a fast food restaurant watching the shift supervisor drive their employees relentlessly. But in our current circumstances, the image of being forced to make bricks without straw seems more relevant than ever. Because for so many of us, we're seeking to maintain the same levels of productivity and to achieve the same goals as we did before the pandemic, but with an entirely new set of practical problems to overcome. And if this is true for those in care homes and for medical and nursing staff in hospitals and for staff in schools and universities and for other key workers, it's also, I think, peculiarly relevant to the people in this Zoom room today. Although I'm in full-time tutoring role at Bristol Baptist College now, I was sharing pastoral leadership of a church last March when the first lockdown struck. So I do have some knowledge about what I'm speaking of. I vividly remember having a lengthy phone call with my colleague late afternoon on a Monday in March. And at 4:15, we put the phone down, having made a plan for how we would meet in a COVID-safe manner over the following weeks. And at 5 o'clock, I got into my car to drive home, and Boris Johnson was on the radio announcing the nation would be going into lockdown within the next few days. And I got home and I sat in genuine disorientation for about an hour before going back out to a deacons meeting, the last time we met in the building for many months. And I remember the sense of being utterly overwhelmed in those next few weeks. How could we possibly maintain meaningful pastoral care with people we couldn't meet face to face with? How could we possibly offer meaningful corporate worship if we were unable to gather in person? What about people in our congregation who can't access the internet? How would we care for the dying if we couldn't even visit them and pray with them in hospital? Can communion be meaningful? Is it even legitimate when it's not celebrated by a group of people in the same room? How could we manage decision-making when our church constitution necessitated an in-person church members meeting? That was actually particularly pressing for us because I was moderating the church to find their full-time pastor, and we got stuck in the settlement process. I know these issues will be familiar to all of you, and I needn't rehearse them further. In the weeks and months that followed, I have marvelled at human creativity, flexibility, adaptability. We've all learned new skills. We've all discovered that we can do things we didn't know we were capable of. We have reinvented, adapted, and been extraordinarily resilient. But we're tired. I think I speak not just for myself when I say so. I think we're tired of continually having to adapt, of trying to optimize the suboptimal. And many, of course, of us have faced significant pastoral challenges in our congregations and perhaps in our own families. And so I wonder if this idea of bricks without straw, of trying to maintain the same degree of productivity with an entirely diminished set of tools, is a reasonable description of the task that we feel we are facing in these days. And so I've got just a few reflections to offer today, mainly built around some questions which you might like to take away and consider. And my first question is this: what is your measure of productivity? How do you evaluate whether you have been effective in your ministry? Do you try to quantify it? Counting bricks, as it were, bums on seats, as we used to say, or perhaps these days YouTube watches. Do you assess it by the feel factor? The appreciative emails, the equivalent of the heartfelt handshake on the door at the end of the service. In actual fact, is effectiveness the thing that we really should be evaluating? I'm always struck by the utter lack of efficiency with which Jesus seems to have conducted his ministry. He speaks to large crowds sometimes, but often just to a few friends. He doesn't ride about on a horse quickly, strategically targeting large cities. He walks slowly from town to village. He stops and dallies with people who lack any influence. He spends time with people who will let him down. He tells people to go away. There's something remarkably inefficient about that. It doesn't look as if Jesus' main outcome measure was effectiveness. Perhaps faithfulness is a better outcome measure. Perhaps it's not about how many bricks we produce or even how neatly we stack them. Perhaps it's about whether we make them in a Christ-like way. So this is my first question. What is your measure of productivity? Are you driving yourself towards goals that are unhelpful? And that leads me to my second question, which is, who is your Pharaoh? Who or what is driving you, is making you work, is stretching you and pushing you? Is it the voice in your own head? The voice that drives you with the fear of failure or with the pride of omnicompetence? Is it the expectations of others? Sometimes churches can speak a great deal about grace, but extend very little to their ministers. Who is your Pharaoh? Who are you serving? I recall Jesus' words, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I don't want to be oversimplistic about interpreting this. We know that the call to Christian ministry is often hard, and that the lightness of the burden is perhaps more about the one who shares it with us, rather than a description of the weight that needs to be carried. But do we sometimes make that weight heavier than it needs to be? Do we sometimes allow others to add to our burden, or the voices in our own head to drive us? Who is your Pharaoh? And this leads to my third question, which I'm going to venture some answers for, but I invite you also to ponder. It's this: what distinguishes a slave from a free worker? Bricks need to be made. Churches need to be led. What's the difference between making bricks out of compulsion and making bricks by choice? What's the difference between leading a church out of habit, duty, a sense of compulsion, or leading a church from a place of freedom? Thinking about the people of Israel and their experience in Egypt, three suggestions come to my mind. First of all, a slave doesn't share in the produce of what he or she makes. They don't benefit from their work. Others gain from it, but the slave is depleted by it. A free worker ought to be able to participate in the things they are producing. They build a museum and then visit it with their children. They grow crops and enjoy them with their families. They prepare and lead worship and encounter God as they do so. They share the blessings that they offer their congregation. Second, a slave can't observe the Sabbath. They can't rest. They cannot worship their God. It's striking that what Moses asks Pharaoh for is permission to take the people out into the desert to worship. It's also striking that Deuteronomy's version of the commandment of Sabbath is explained like this. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Pharaoh tells you the Sabbath will reduce your productivity. A slave does not get to rest, but a free worker does. Taking Sabbath is a weekly reminder that you are no slave. And my third answer is this: a slave doesn't receive generosity from their master. As you'll remember, once the people have been brought out of Egypt by the powerful hand of God, they come to the desert and they find themselves hungry. And what happens next is in striking contrast with their experience of slavery under Pharaoh. Remember, Pharaoh wouldn't even give them the materials they needed to do the work they were obligated to do. But day by day in the desert, they were fed by the open hand of God. He didn't give them a month's worth of food at a time, not even a week's worth. Day by day, they trusted him, and he supplied. And those who tried to hoard because they didn't believe God could be relied upon discovered that the leftover manna went rotten. Every day, God supplied for them, steadily, quietly, reliably. They had moved from bondage to the Pharaoh who begrudged them even the straw to make their bricks, into the service of a God whose abundance supplied their needs day by day. So in a few minutes, we're going to move off into a time of reflection, and I'd invite you to ponder those questions. What is your measure of productivity? Who is your Pharaoh? And what marks of slavery or freedom are characterizing your life at the moment? And I'd like to suggest Psalm 90 to you as part of your meditation, if you'd find that helpful. Psalm 90 is traditionally attributed to Moses, so it seems peculiarly suitable to accompany this story. But really, I chose it because of the way it laments, the way it wrestles with God for a blessing, and the way it acknowledges human frailty, which I think we all feel right now. And the words at the end, for a people who have been making bricks without straw, people who are seeking to build the people of God, seem peculiarly appropriate. So I'm going to read Psalm 90 to you now, and then we're going to play a short musical version of it, which you may like to listen to. And then without any further, bidding, I invite you to go off and spend some time reflecting with God. Psalm 90, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn humans back to dust, saying, return to dust, O sons of men. For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. You sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like the new grass of the morning. Though in the morning it springs up new, by evening it is dry and withered. We are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. The length of our days is 70 years or 80, if we have the strength, yet their span trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For your wrath is as great as the fear that is due to you. Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Relent, O Lord, how long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen trouble. May your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their people. May the favor of the Lord our God rest upon us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Amen.
Show pity